People destroy their power not because they lack intelligence, but because they cannot control their tongue. In a world where everyone wants to be heard, the one who learns silence becomes the most dangerous player of all. Today, we dive into the ruthless wisdom of Niccolò Machiavelli to uncover why silence is the strongest weapon in the art of power. In every court, every hall, every battlefield of power, men lose not because they are weak, but because they cannot hold their tongue. They mistake noise for influence. They mistake expression for strength. And in their desperate need to be understood, they become transparent, predictable, and easy to control. I have learned through pain, exile, and observation that silence is not mere absence of words. It is an instrument of dominance. The man who can stay quiet while others expose themselves through speech becomes the unseen ruler of the room. When you speak too soon, you give the world a map to your intentions, but when you remain silent, they see only fog. And in that fog, they begin to imagine you as something greater, sharper, and more dangerous than you might truly be. People fear what they cannot define. They respect what they cannot read. And so, silence becomes your mask, your shield, your throne. Think of the man who speaks at every opportunity. His words flow easily, and so does his power, leaking with every sentence. He wants to be liked, to be heard, to be seen as clever. But by exposing his thoughts, he reveals his strategy. The more he says, the more they learn how to strike him. Now think of the man who listens, who observes, who speaks rarely, and when he does, every word lands like a decree. He does not argue, for argument requires equality, and he is not equal to those who chatter. His silence becomes a mirror, reflecting the weakness of those who cannot bear it. There is a subtle terror in quietness. When you do not respond, people grow uneasy. They begin to question themselves, to doubt their own position. They reveal their insecurities trying to fill your silence. They give you their truth, while you give them nothing. This is control. Not through force, but through restraint. I remember the courts of Florence, where words were weapons sharper than any blade. Every man tried to speak louder, faster, more eloquently, desperate to prove his loyalty, his wisdom, his place near the throne. And yet, the most powerful among them, the duke, the cardinal, the prince, spoke little. When they did, silence followed their words like an echo of judgment, because silence gives weight to speech. When you speak rarely, your words gain value. But if you speak endlessly, your words become air. Heard by all, remembered by none. I once advised a young diplomat who was eager to prove his intelligence. He spoke in every meeting, revealing his strategies, his ideas, his beliefs. He mistook approval for power, but he failed to understand that the smiles around him were daggers behind his back. They had already read his mind, because he had handed it to them. And when the time came, they used his own words to destroy him. Power dies in exposure. Mystery sustains it. You must understand this silence forces others to interpret you, and in doing so, they reveal themselves. When they wonder what you're thinking, they tell you who they are. When they assume your motives, they project their fears. Silence is not passive. It is a trap, and most will walk into it willingly. When you remain silent, you do not lose the conversation. You dominate it invisibly. Your opponent speaks more, exposes more, and becomes more vulnerable while trying to break your calm. Your quietness forces him into chaos. He mistakes your restraint for uncertainty, and that illusion gives you time. Time to study, to calculate, to decide when to strike. Never forget, every time you speak, you are trading information. Every word is a transaction, every confession a currency. The wise man spends sparingly. I have often said, a ruler's silence is more powerful than a soldier's sword. For while the sword cuts flesh, silence cuts deeper. It slices through perception, leaving others guessing what lies beneath. And in politics, in war, in life, perception is everything. If they think you are weak, you are already defeated. If they think you are strong, they will hesitate. But if they cannot tell, if they cannot read your intentions, they will fear you, because the unknown is always more frightening than the visible. The art of silence is the art of control. When you hold your tongue, you hold your power. You force others to reveal themselves first, to show their hand, to make their move. And only then do you strike, with words so precise and deliberate that they reshape the room. To master silence is to master patience. To master patience is to master timing. And timing, my friend, is what separates the ruler from the ruled. So when you find yourself tempted to speak, when your pride whispers that you must respond, that you must be understood, remember this. Those who rush to be understood often lose the advantage of being underestimated. And the underestimated man, the human mind, cannot bear silence. It demands answers, explanations, patterns. And when you give it none, it begins to invent them. This is where power begins, not in what is said, but in what remains unsaid. The psychology of silence is the psychology of control. When you speak, you limit yourself to words. But when you stay silent, others build entire stories around your stillness. They imagine your motives, your strengths, your knowledge. They create the myth you never had to tell. I learned this early, watching nobles and diplomats in Florence whisper among themselves about men who barely spoke. They said, "He is dangerous. He must know something." Not because the man proved it, but because he gave them nothing to disprove it. Silence is the art of making others do your work for you. People are slaves to curiosity. They cannot tolerate mystery. When you withhold your thoughts, they begin to reveal theirs. They try to fill the void with interpretation, and in doing so, they expose their fears, their desires, their insecurities. The less you give, the more they show. In silence, people become desperate for meaning. They analyze every gesture, every glance, every breath, trying to extract truth from absence. You become an enigma. An enigma is never weak. The world fears what it cannot define. Watch how men behave around someone who rarely speaks. They lean in, they study his face. They second-guess every silence, every pause. Their minds begin to work against them, creating monsters out of shadows, and while they imagine your strength, you quietly gain it. A silent man possesses a strange magnetism. His stillness becomes a mirror where others see themselves. They confess things they should not. They reveal plans they should have hidden. All because your quietness made them uncomfortable. Silence unsettles the unguarded, and the unguarded will always speak to destroy their discomfort. There is a hidden power in letting others underestimate you, or fear you, without ever correcting them. The mind of your enemy becomes your weapon. They will invent lies about you, and those lies will make you larger than life. They will call you ruthless, cunning, unpredictable. And in doing so, they will build the very image that protects you. I remember a conversation with a prince who once asked me, "Machiavelli, why do my enemies seem to know my every move?" I told him, "Because you speak of your plans before you act. You feed their curiosity instead of starving it. When you reveal your thoughts, you give others the map to your soul. But when you remain silent, they are forced to wander blind, afraid of traps that may not even exist. This is the power of the unspoken. It multiplies your presence. A single glance, a pause, a word left unsaid can echo louder than a speech. When you say little, every syllable becomes precious. When you withhold, people remember. They assign meaning even when none exists. That is how leaders command without shouting, how rulers intimidate without lifting a blade. Silence, when used with intent, manipulates the emotions of others. It makes them impatient. It drives them to speak first, to act first, to expose themselves in their haste to fill the void. And once they do, once they rush into the trap, your silence becomes your victory. I have seen silence cause panic in councils. A man who does not reply becomes a mystery. They ask themselves, is he offended? Is he plotting? Is he waiting? They invent answers to comfort themselves, and those invented answers turn into fear. You must understand silence is not emptiness. It is suggestion. It whispers to the imagination, and imagination is the most dangerous force in politics. A word can be debated, challenged, refuted. But an assumption cannot be fought because it lives in the minds of men. The unspoken creates illusion, and illusion is the foundation of all authority. Consider the priest who speaks softly, pausing before every phrase. The crowd leans closer, hungry for his words. His silence makes his message divine. Consider the general who says nothing before battle. His soldiers read courage in his stillness. Consider the merchant who listens while others boast. His silence allows him to measure every lie. When you master the art of silence, you no longer need to convince. You no longer need to explain. Others will do it for you. They will praise you for wisdom you never spoke, and fear you for knowledge you never revealed. To remain silent is to let others build your legend with their imagination. It is to hold a mirror before the world and make it see its own reflection, while believing it sees you. Silence is not passive. It is a game of psychological warfare. The less you reveal, the more you control the conversation without ever joining it. The moment you open your mouth, you end the guessing, and with it, the fear. So long as you remain silent, the mystery stays alive. And in that mystery lies, there is a truth that most men learn too late. The tongue has destroyed more empires than war ever could. Words once released cannot be retrieved. They escape. They multiply, they return sharpened against you. I have seen kings fall not because of their enemies' swords, but because of their own mouths. Every time you speak, you give away a piece of your power. You may not see it, but those listening do. They weigh your tone, they study your expressions, they dissect every phrase to find weakness. When you speak too freely, you offer them the map to your intentions. and the intelligent will use it to conquer you. I remember a courtier who served the Medici family, a man gifted with wit and confidence. He believed his eloquence made him untouchable. Every dinner, he spoke endlessly, mocking rivals, revealing secrets, boasting of plans. The room would laugh, but behind the laughter were sharpened daggers. The men he mocked waited quietly, patiently, and when the time came they repeated his own words before the Duke. Words that were once a game became his death sentence. This is the cost of talking too much. You become predictable, vulnerable, exposed. You give others the tools to build your cage. Power does not belong to those who shout, but to those who calculate in silence. A single reckless sentence can destroy years of strategy. The fool believes that speech proves intelligence, that expression wins respect. But in truth, every unnecessary word is a confession. When you explain yourself too often, you reveal uncertainty. When you talk of your dreams, you announce your vulnerabilities. And when you voice your fears, you teach others exactly how to manipulate you. I once stood before a prince who trusted no one. He asked me, "Machiavelli, how do I know who my true allies are?" I told him, "Give them silence. Let them speak, and they will tell you who they are. Speak too soon, and they will only tell you what you want to hear." The wise ruler does not expose himself first. He allows others to speak themselves into exposure. The man who talks too much creates noise. The man who listens creates knowledge. In silence you gather power, in noise you scatter it. I have learned that those who constantly explain themselves crave approval, and craving approval is the first symptom of weakness. When a ruler explains, he lowers himself to the level of the ruled. When a strategist reveals his plan, he gives his enemy time to adapt. When a leader speaks before acting, he betrays the element of surprise. Words are the enemy of secrecy, and secrecy is the foundation of strategy. Understand this: every conversation is a negotiation. Each sentence you utter either strengthens or weakens your position. If you speak carelessly, you surrender leverage. The wise man learns to value silence the way a banker values gold. For once spent, it can never be regained. There was a merchant in Florence who built his wealth by speaking only when necessary. In public, he appeared dull, unremarkable, almost foolish. His rivals mocked him for his quietness, assuming ignorance. Yet while they argued, he listened. And while they revealed their plans, he learned their weaknesses. By the time they realized his intent, he owned them all. To talk too much is to reveal your rhythm. Every man has a pattern, a pulse. His ambitions, his fears, his pride. But when you are silent, that rhythm disappears. Others cannot anticipate you. They cannot read your next move. They cannot prepare for your strike. Words are seductive. They promise control, but deliver vulnerability. You feel powerful when you speak, but what you are truly doing is handing over ammunition. Your enemies do not need spies when you volunteer your secrets. Your friends do not need loyalty when they already know your limits. Silence keeps both guessing, and guessing keeps them obedient. I have seen silence humiliate even the loudest men. In debate, the one who grows emotional first loses power. The man who cannot bear silence rushes to fill it with explanations, apologies, defenses. And in doing so, he concedes control. The man who stays calm, who lets silence hang heavy in the air, forces others to break it, and in breaking it, they reveal their anxiety. The cost of talking too much is not only strategic, it is spiritual. The more you speak, the more you lose the ability to observe. Your attention scatters across every word you release. You stop listening. You stop seeing. You stop thinking clearly. A ruler who cannot endure silence is a slave to his own impulses. You must learn to hold your tongue even when provoked, even when praised. Especially when praised, for praise is often a trap, a way to make you speak, to make you comfortable, to make you careless. Many have lost their crowns by revealing too much in the warmth of flattery. A wise man accepts praise with a smile and silence. There is no virtue in constant expression. The world rewards mystery, not transparency. Speak less than you think, and think far more than you speak. Every time you feel the urge to prove yourself, remember, the need to be understood is the desire of the powerless. Power does not explain itself. Power observes. Power waits. Power chooses its words as it chooses its battles. Rarely and only when the outcome is already decided. So guard your words as you would guard your crown. Speak only when silence will cost you more than truth. For the man who talks without measure gives away his kingdom without knowing it. And once your words are set free into the world, they are no longer yours. They belong to those who will use them against you. And when that moment comes, you will realize that the greatest betrayal, there is a misconception among men, that to be silent is to be weak, and to speak is to be strong. But power, true power, lies not in constant speech, but in the precision of it. Words, when used carelessly, are wind, But when used strategically, they become weapons, subtle, sharp, and absolute. I have always said that silence is not the absence of speech, but the preparation for it. The wise man is not mute. He is deliberate. He listens when others rush to prove themselves. He observes when others fight to be heard. And when he finally speaks, his words cut through the noise like a blade through silk. The power of speech does not come from volume, nor from frequency, but from timing. Every word must serve a purpose, to persuade, to deceive, or to reveal just enough truth to strengthen illusion. Anything else is waste, and waste is weakness. I once advised a prince who struggled to control his court. He spoke too often, trying to explain his reasoning to nobles who had already decided to betray him. He believed that by talking, he could win their loyalty. But every justification he offered became another window into his doubts. His words, meant to strengthen his rule, only exposed his uncertainty. His silence would have made him feared. His speeches made him questioned. A ruler's voice must be like thunder, rare, deliberate, and always followed by consequence. If you speak every hour, your words lose their weight. But if you remain silent until the right moment, even a whisper can command armies. The greatest speeches in history are remembered not for their length, but for their precision. I have watched men rise to power with only a few sentences. They spoke at the perfect time, to the perfect ears, with perfect intent. They understood that words, once released, cannot be controlled, so they released them only when they were certain of their impact. You must treat your words as an archer treats his arrows. Never wasted, never scattered, always aimed. But understand this, strategic speech is not honesty, it is performance. You do not speak to reveal yourself, you speak to direct others. The tongue of a ruler must be his greatest instrument of manipulation. A single well-placed phrase can build alliances, destroy reputations, ignite loyalty, or plant doubt. The goal is not to express truth, but to use truth when it serves power. When I negotiated between princes and republics, I learned that silence often holds more persuasion than rhetoric. I would allow my opponents to speak first, to reveal their desires, their desperation, their arrogance. Only when they had exhausted themselves did I speak. And when I did, I spoke slowly, deliberately, with words that forced them to think rather than react. I made silence my ally and words my weapon. Most men speak to fill emptiness. The wise man speaks to create it. When you deliver your words with confidence, then withdraw into silence, your absence becomes louder than any argument. They will replay your words in their minds, trying to decode meaning. That is control. When your silence continues to speak even after you've stopped. Speech should never be reactionary. The moment you react, you lose control. When insulted, stay silent. When provoked, stay calm. The fool needs to be heard immediately. The strategist waits for the perfect moment to make his voice inescapable. There is more destruction in a single calculated sentence than in 1,000 emotional outbursts. I once witnessed a general silence an entire council with only 3 words. His rivals had argued for hours, each shouting to assert dominance. The room was chaos. Pride, ego, desperation. And then he stood, waited for the noise to die, and said, "You've already lost." The room fell quiet, not because his words were many, but because they were final. That is the art of control, the mastery of speech through the mastery of restraint. Words are not meant to serve emotion, they are meant to serve intention. Every word you release must move the game forward. If it does not, you have spoken in vain. A ruler who cannot command his tongue cannot command his people, and a man who cannot command his emotions cannot command his tongue. Learn to use speech as a sculptor uses his chisel. Not to express every thought, but to shape perception. You do not need to tell the world who you are. You only need to make them believe what serves you. Speak to create impressions, not confessions. Speak to influence, not to explain. Speak to lead, not to please. Every silence must have purpose, and every word must have consequence. Between the two lies mastery, the ability to control others without ever raising your voice. The man who has nothing to prove speaks little. The man who speaks only when necessary rules conversation. And when he finally does speak, even his enemies listen. For power is not found in the abundance of speech, but in the scarcity of it. The more you say, the more they learn. The less you say, the more they imagine. And imagination, once guided correctly, becomes your most obedient servant. The art of rule begins not with speaking, but with knowing precisely when and how. Power does not belong to the loudest voice, but to the one that chooses when to speak. The fool believes speech wins influence. The wise know silence builds it. In a world where men rush to be understood, the one who observes, who listens, who withholds, becomes the master of perception. When you stay quiet, you are not retreating. You are gathering power. You are studying the weakness in others, watching them expose themselves while you remain untouched. Silence confuses the proud, unsettles the arrogant, and enslaves the impulsive. It is the unseen weapon that no defense can counter. Every word must be deliberate. Every silence must be intentional. Speak not to react, but to rule. Reveal nothing that does not serve you. The art of silence is the art of strategy, and the art of strategy is the foundation of power. So learn to stay quiet, my friend. Let others drown in their noise. Let them reveal their hands while you sit in patience. Because when the world has exhausted itself with words, the man who speaks last speaks as a king.